Hi, everyone, and welcome to the next panel with the CSF Diversity Initiative. This is a new webinar that we're starting, a series that we started 2 years ago, and today's webinar is going to be talking about diversity and inclusion. We have a panelist full of our young leader members, young board leader members, and a president council member, and of course, the CEO of the Children's Scholarship Fund. I want to tell you briefly what the Children's Scholarship Fund is, what are our Young Leader Board members, and what are our CSF alumni. So the CSF Young Leaders is a group of young professionals who typically live in New York City, but because of the pandemic, they're kind of all over the place, including myself, who is currently located in Los Angeles. And we're young professionals who donate our time and our resources to help raise funds for more scholarships, to provide scholarships to the kids in New York City, and also to provide guidance and leadership to our alumni. That takes me to what is a CSF alumna. If you received a scholarship from CSF, K through 8th grade, after you graduated 8th grade and you moved on to high school, you now become a CSF alumni. And we have a CSF alumni network, which you are now a part of, in which we do our best to provide, again, guidance and leadership and provide resources to help guide you through the next chapters in your life as you go on to high school, as you move on to college, and even as you move on into your career. CSF wants to stay with you and be with you and help you and guide you through every facet of your life. I myself am a CSF alumna. Again, my name is Nicole Serrato. I work for CSF. I also received a scholarship from CSF. So I've seen firsthand what the opportunity has done for my life and the life of many others. But without further ado, I'm going to have each of our panelists, I'm going to introduce them first, and each of them are going to come on and talk for about 4 to 5 minutes about diversity and inclusion. So the first person I'm going to introduce is Tamika. She is a graduate of Temple University, and she now works at the New York City Cyber Command. We have Tim, who works at HIG Capital and graduated from Cornell University with a bachelor's in hotel administration, finance, and real estate. Next, we have Thomas. He is a president council member and he graduated from Skidmore College. He works in development and alumni relations at New York University. And then we have Josu, who works at Ernst & Young and is a graduate of the University of Albany. And last but not least, we have Darla Rumfo, the president of the Children's Scholarship Fund. She graduated from the University of North Dakota and the George Washington University of Law School. So this is a very extensive panel. I'm so excited about this webinar tonight. Can't wait to hear what all of them have to say. So take out your notepads, take notes, also write down any questions that you might have. We are going to have a Q&A section at the end of this. So write down those questions, and when we open for Q&A, you can type the questions in the chat. There should also be a Q&A section where you can type those questions as well. So before I introduce the first panelist, I just want to point out here that I do have our social media up here to my, I think, right or left. I don't know what you see on your side. But if you're not following us on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, please do so and keep up with us. And without further ado, Tamika.
Hey, thank you, Nicole. Hi, everyone. My name is Tamika Hendricks. I am currently at New York City Cyber Command as the director of HR. I attended Temple University and went to the Fox School of Business, so I have a bachelor's in business. When I think of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think about 5 experiences in my life that have shaped the way that I approach my job in HR, but also the way that I interact with my colleagues. So I grew up in Woodbridge, New Jersey. It's a small, predominantly white town in New Jersey, and mostly white. And I chose the most diverse people around me because I have a pretty dominant personality. So the more diversity in thought makes me the stronger person. And I realized pretty early on, I was fortunate enough to realize pretty early on that a diverse set of friends that sometimes we fought, sometimes we argued, but challenged me mentally was always going to push me ahead to get to where I wanted to be and make me think really seriously about where I wanted to be. So that led me to choose Temple University. Temple at the time was 15% Black. And so for me, I didn't see myself at a HBCU per se, But I did want to go to a large university that had people that looked like me. Also, a part of that was doing the summer program. So I went to a few HBCU programs, stayed in HBCU campus for the weekend, and realized that just wasn't my vibe, even though it's a good time, just wasn't for me. So I ended up at Temple University. And so that's the one thing. The second one was my first internship experience. So I was fortunate enough to find an internship in downtown Philly that was owned by a Black woman. It was a financial institution owned by a Black woman, which is super rare. And all the clientele were men. So a lot of our employees were women of color, but our colleagues or our clients were all men. So whenever March Madness came around, everyone's talking about basketball. And Tamika does not really like basketball. I'm not a sports person at all. And I had one of our lead analysts approach me and she said, hey, if you want to be in this business world where there's mostly men, then you need to learn sports. And so I felt conflicted because now I'm being asked as a woman to adjust to the men around me, who are the majority, but also it made me think about the way that I interact with people, and maybe there is opportunity for me to learn different ways to socialize and network and kind of step out of my comfort zone. So I chose football, go Eagles, but it did help me honestly learn to have those casual conversations, those conversations in the elevator that I wouldn't have typically had. So it's a conflicted message that I received, but I was able to tweak it to work in my perspective. So that's number two. Number three, Eagles. I got my second job at a shipyard in Philadelphia. So out of 1,200 employees, there were about 30 women. Most of them were in the office. And so they all stayed in the office and they didn't go out into the shipyard. They didn't go out into the shops. They didn't go into the paint department. But I like to learn and I wanted to be around the people and I wanted to, from an HR perspective, understand the people that we're working with. So I had my little Eagles jersey and I showed up to work and, had those conversations, made those connections. And that, again, in this predominantly male environment, and maybe out of the 30 women, I think 2 others were Black. So being one of the only Black women in between 1,200 employees and trying to figure out how to build those connections, learning what other people like to do, understanding how other folks have these casual conversations. So a lot of times it doesn't have to be forced. I feel like when you're in a diverse area, try not to force it. Organically learn the things you like to learn, but also try to step out of those boundaries that you might only talk to your friends about. So the shipyard was a huge learning curve for myself because I had to learn how to deal with men that were older than me, but also, being the only woman in the room and being able to control the conversation. So as a training coordinator, working with all of these men that were probably twice my age, but also saying like, hey, I'm your HR person. So I'm going to tell you when you're getting a raise. I'm also going to have to fire you. So figuring out ways to build those social connections to make things a little bit easier for me to network and rise up in my job. Where I'm currently at as director of HR, I was given the opportunity to create our diversity, equity, and inclusion group. So for me, again, being a Black woman in the workplace and looking for mentorship, looking for other women like me, but also trying to be that woman for other younger women in this workplace. I was able to create our ERG. So a lot of organizations, a lot of companies have employee resource groups, ERGs, or sometimes they're called other things. I'm sure other folks in the panel have them labeled as something else at their organization, but for us, they're employee resource groups. So I was able to create one for the women in cybersecurity. So again, cybersecurity is also a space where there aren't a lot of women. So taking that opportunity to create community for the women, the senior women, but also our interns, where again, you're having employees, but we are a smaller company of 135, maybe 20-ish women. So creating those spaces from that perspective, from that lens, for younger women to feel comfortable, but also for us as a community to feel inclusive. So that's a little bit about my experience. I look at it from a Black woman perspective. I try to expand as much as possible. So I can always refer different books that are outside of my own lens, that have helped me channel into other spaces. So whether it's understanding folks that have disabilities a little bit better, understanding different religious backgrounds, all of those types of things, I think really help you casually, comfortably navigate different conversations in the workplace.
Thank you so much, Tamika. That was really great. I'm sure people are going to have some more questions for you in regards to how you created those relationships. So next we're going to have Tim. And so Tim, if you can come on and tell us, what your experience has been with the diversity inclusion.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Nicole. So I'm Tim. I'm currently working at HIG Capital based in New York, which is a private equity firm. And I went to undergrad for Cornell University. And I guess, back 25 years ago, I was, born in Seoul, South Korea. So, I was an immigrant when I first came to the US when I was just 9 years old. And it was a really big change because, in Korea, there's no diversity. There aren't that many foreigners. And it was my first time just coming to the US, the city called Tacoma, Washington, which is, Pacific Northwest, predominantly white, as the neighborhood that Tamika had mentioned as well. So I also grew up in a neighborhood where I just, was a minority, and I was the only Asian kid in my classroom. And I just immigrated. I couldn't speak the language, so initially I just didn't really talk. I just uh, sort of forfeited myself from being the diversity person in the classroom, and just kind of almost felt defeated in a way, because I just didn't find my peers and colleagues the same way that I just perceived myself. But in just a week I was wrong, and my classmates just started reaching out to me, and started talking to me, and I realized that although that language barrier, I was able to connect with them, and I eventually opened myself up. And that's the punchline that I want to really convey to you guys today, is that don't be like myself when I first walked into that classroom and think that I'm just different from other people. And I was lucky. I just had great classmates who are able to really, help me open myself up. But, I could have done that myself as well. And I just, that was a lesson learned for me. And, fast forward to, high school and eventually Cornell, which is, undergrad, a really big institution with almost, 15,000 people of undergraduate students from all different backgrounds. I learned that diversity really enriches you, and eventually I took it as an advantage where I can talk about my experience, and really appreciate the differences that people have, and even the difference that I have for myself. And even now I'm still that diversity person in finance, where it's predominantly white male, especially at the senior level. But that said, I'm just different from where I was, first when I first immigrated and when I first walked into the classroom. I recognize that from that experience, I can definitely have my own voice, and I am similar, and I am same person as all these people who are around me, just not because of color or background or where they grew up. We are all, have that same equality, and share that perspective, and care for each other. So that all said, diversity is something that really that I still appreciate to this date, and that's something that you really shouldn't close yourself on.
Thank you so much, Tim, for sharing. It's so exciting that you found your voice and sharing that with everyone else. I know it's gonna help some students know that they can find their voice too. So thank you so much for sharing that. So we're gonna move on with Thomas. If you can jump on and tell us a little bit about your experience.
I'm so grateful to be here and to be talking with you all. And there's so much to unpack here. So I urge everyone on this call to ask questions, because maybe you may hear one perspective we're saying, but that's not the full perspective. So by asking us questions, it helps to just uncover what's underneath. But to start this, I would say that I encourage you to be unapologetically yourself in any environment you walk in. And it's easier said than being, it's easier said than done. I think because of where I am in my career, it's almost a little easier to be courageous and just be myself and unapologetic. But I remember that young Thomas that was nervous, didn't really know, didn't have parents that had walked the walk or had been in certain environments, and it was just very nerve wracking. But if I could talk to myself as I talk to you, I would just say, be unapologetic, be yourself. If you're quirky, if you like anime, if there's certain things that you really are passionate about, just kind of follow that. And then the second thing I'll say is just be curious. And so I'll talk a little bit about my background, but there's sometimes people that look different than you, and sometimes you find there's not that much difference. And so I think the recurring theme is sometimes there's fear of the unknown, and there's just, because I think the United States loves the conversation around race, we can almost become nervous about having a conversation with someone that looks different than us or was raised in a different state or in a different country. And so my message is be fearless, be curious, introduce yourself, say hello, and always assume the best. And this is just things that personally have changed my life and has allowed me to grow like never before. But just to say a couple of tidbits, my name is Thomas Rivera Patterson. I'm Jamaican and Puerto Rican. I have 9 sisters. Those are things I identify with. I'm a brother, I'm a son, and I work for NYU. And so fundraising for me is something I've been passionate about at NYU. I represent the university-wide. And so I specifically focus on 6 to 7 figure gifts. All that means is like 100,000 to about 3 to 4 million. Not really, really important, but all it comes down to is when I grew up in the South Bronx, I was really interested in how to help the community, how to push nonprofits, how to make an impact. And the focus, some people focused on volunteering, some people focused on bake sales. I was really focused on how to bring money to organizations to keep them vital, to keep them pushing, and to allow for programs to help communities that look like mine, right? That often didn't get the funds or get the resources. So I wanted to be that resource, and that's the work that I do today. And outside of NYU, I help to fundraise for organizations like CSF and other causes that I'm really passionate about. And just to kind of go through really quickly a few instances that I experienced growing up and how it really shaped and opened my eyes. And so speaking Spanish all my life and growing up in the South Bronx, I really saw that within my community, right? Not just focusing on a community that was mostly white, but within my community, there were often ignorances, right? People would look at me and assume certain things, and it wasn't factual. I had a lot of, specifically like Hispanic individuals, like Puerto Rican, Cuban, Dominican, really saying certain things and didn't know I could understand the language. And so I only bring that up to say that even when we look at ourselves and we look at our community, there are things that we could work on. There are things that we can grow on. And I think that just in growing and looking at diversity, in order for us to give love to others, we first have to look at ourselves and love ourselves, and then love the people around us. And so that's what I experienced very, very early on, being discriminated against because of how I looked. And I think that allowed me to take control over the things that I knew when my Hispanic friend invited me to their house and the first thing they said was, "Oh, he speaks Spanish." I knew there was some okay, I need him to be accepted by my parents. But that allowed me to meet that parent and love that parent and know that, okay, this person has some limitations, right, around what's comfortable for them, but they're a good person. And so sometimes just see the person, love the person, and it could be difficult. And so pushing forward, Skidmore College was a different environment. It was the first time, other than I think Tamika and Tim speaking, it was the first time that I was personally around an all-white environment. Really, in New York, growing up in the Bronx, the only time I personally saw white people is if I went down to Times Square or if I left the community, but never really in a completely white environment. And so what helped me when I was in college was finding community. And that's the message I would push, no matter where you are, right? After college, I ended up moving to Spain and I traveled a ton, but no matter where you are, there are people that love what you love. And so to start with, just something I would share is find community. find that professor that loves what you love, or when they speak, it does something to your soul. Or, find that community. If you like to play sports, go to the sports realms and meet people and just grow like that. And once you go to those environments and you grow your community, those individuals are going to be different than yourself, right? Because you're bridged together by interest, right? Not by race or color or how you look. And then they're going to introduce you to other environments. And those experiences are going to break down any misconceptions, anything that the media or the news has put in your mind to like, okay, this is a person. And you're going to see, like I said earlier, their limitations and their greatnesses. And that's, I think, where not only as a country, but as people, we have to really look at each other and love each other, not just see, okay, this is different. I don't like this. This is a threat. And so kind of just bridging those gaps. And the last thing I'll say in the workplace, similarly, I work predominantly around all white people. And I really, hope to answer any questions that comes along. But at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is there's real things that I've experienced. There's real things that I can look at and say, yes, this was a terrible experience. But above and beyond that, I think the message and why I thought it was so important to be here was a message that I don't hear enough. And take the bridge, open the door, have a conversation, be curious, and assume for the best. And so that's my message. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thomas. There's so much wisdom in all three of what they've brought to the table so far. Tamika talking about building those relationships, and Tim talking about finding your voice, and then Thomas talking about being fearless, and also seeing loving people and loving yourself. So it's amazing so far. Next, we still have two more panelists before we go into the Q&A section. So Josu, if you can take it over from here.
Hello, everyone. I'm Josu Trevejo. I currently work with EY. I'm a senior within the firm. And I went to the University of Albany for both undergrad and graduate school. So I'll start off with what diversity and inclusion means to me. What it really boils down to is that no matter where you come from, what you look like, or what you sound like, anything different, fundamentally, we have more similarities than differences. That's what it means to me. It can mean a lot of different things to different people. So in terms of my college experience, I'll start with that. I went to University of Albany, and I chose to go there because I went to the school and I saw people from a multitude of backgrounds, and I was like, oh, this is great. This is just like my high school. There's a ton of people with different backgrounds, and I can get to meet all of them. And I was an accounting and finance major, and as I progressed through the years, when I got to business school, I realized like, oh, my classes aren't as diverse anymore, which at first was a little intimidating. I was around a sophomore, I was away from home, and as I progressed through business schools, like I knew less and less people because I was all my friends from freshman year were taking different majors. And I guess my first piece of advice is you're gonna run into situations like that. It's almost inevitable, but you can't let that stop you. At that point, you have to make a choice. It's like, is this really gonna stop you, or are you gonna really put an effort to network and get to meet other people? And I quickly realized that as you get to meet these people and you end up finding similarities, you realize that just because you might come from a different background or look different, that doesn't mean that you don't have those common traits. And you end up making a ton of great friends and colleagues in college that, you can say you're friends for the remainder of your life. And as I've gone through my college career and my professional career, that trend has followed, right? Like when I joined the corporate world as an accounting and finance professional, like the first company I joined was predominantly white male. And coming from a Hispanic background, it can be a little intimidating to find people to resonate with. But it's the same as you start to talk to people and network, and maybe go to a happy hour or two after work. You start to make friends, and you realize that, oh, like we like the same music, we like the same band. There's definitely more similarities than what just might be on the outside. And that's primarily why I chose to be on this panel. And what I wanted to share with all of you is that there are going to be those situations where throughout your career where you're going to not feel comfortable or you're going to feel out of place. But if you really put in that effort to get to know other people and share those experiences, you'll start to find people that you really resonate with, and you'll realize that you have more in common than differences with the majority of people. And yeah, that's about it.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Thank you so much. Last one, at least, Darla. We're going to hear from the president of the Children's Scholarship Fund.
Thank you. Well, there is so much wisdom in everything that was said. But I'll start out. You might have noticed that Nicole said that I went to the University of North Dakota. Well, nobody probably chooses to go to the University of North Dakota unless you want to be a pilot. But other than that, you have to be born and raised there to end up at the University of North Dakota. And when I was I'm an accounting major. I actually worked in the National Tax Department of Ernst & Young at the time, right out of law school. And I was the third woman hired there was a 65-person office at that time. So I had that part of diversity. But going back a little, when I started law school, one professor who I sort of befriended, as Thomas said, find somebody that you click with. Well, I clicked with the statistics professor, and I wasn't a statistics major. I was an accounting and political science major. And he told me, you really need to I was going to go to law school at the University of Minnesota, because that was a really good school and it's regional. And, that would have been pretty much an experience. It would have been a big place, but it was Minnesota, very close to North Dakota, a big city, but, kind of still close to home. But he said, no, you need to get away from here. You need to go to the East Coast. You need to change it up. So I had been to Washington, D.C. once. And, I'm a farm girl. I grew up on a farm 7 miles from the Canadian border. I was born in Canada because it was the closest hospital. We're talking, this was a sheltered life in a lot of different ways. So I basically just drove out to Washington, D.C. with a girlfriend when I was 20 years old. My parents didn't even go out there, help me find a place to live, anything. They thought I had it under control. And I didn't really think about the fact that I was going to be such a fish out of water. And for the first time in my life, when I got out there, even though I looked like everybody else, but I didn't feel like everybody else. I felt like the most completely different, out of place person that you could ever be. Nobody had any concept of what North Dakota was like. Literally, I was asked things like, do you have indoor plumbing? Running water? I mean, seriously, they had no concept of what North Dakota, and it made me feel very little at first. But even during that whole process, I started to realize that this is actually a really special part of me, that I'm from someplace different. I have a whole different background. I can learn what they know, but they can never know what I know. And everybody I'm looking at on here, whether you're South Korea, whether the South Bronx, being a Black woman growing up in a all-white neighborhood, whatever the experiences are here, you have your own unique experiences that are making you much more complete in many ways than a lot of other people can be. And not to diminish other people's experiences at all, but to realize that what you have, whatever it is that you were given, is exactly what you were meant to have. And that we are all made to do something no one else can do. Every single person on here and every single person listening, there's some person only you will touch in your life. There's something that only you can carry out. There's a great writing by Henry Newman, I think his name is, and he says, there's something only I can do. I may not know it in this life, but I'll know it in the next. But whatever it is, when you're going through life thinking that way. And another thing to remember is that, I figured out early on, don't ever make assumptions about anybody based on their race, whether they're white, they're Black, or their socioeconomic background. Don't make any assumptions about anybody, because you don't know until you talk to them. People always make assumptions about, me even, like I'm a single woman who lives in New York City, I'm white, so people just have sort of in their mind, they automatically go through 5 things that you must think or believe or be like, and usually they're very wrong. And so I've learned, don't ever assume anything about anybody. And, I heard another story one time about this guy named Malcolm Muggeridge, who was a convert to Catholicism. Because he was an atheist actually, and then he followed Mother Teresa around to write a story about her, and he was so overwhelmed by who she was and what she was that he actually became a believer in God, and then he converted to Catholicism. But he was still a bit of an English snob, and at his when he was coming into the church, one of the priests brought a whole 3 or 4 rows full of these kids they were kids that had developmental disabilities, and they were loud and saying things, and he was so embarrassed or mortified that they would have these people making loud noises and what were they going to do to diminish the ceremony that he was a part of. And someone told him something that's so wise. He said, we're all like that. They just wear it on their sleeve. And it's so true. We all are, everybody is hiding something. Everybody's got something lacking. Everybody's got something so if you're looking at somebody and you think that they're, oh my gosh, they know so much more than me. Oh my gosh, they probably grew up differently than I did and had a lot more benefits growing up than I did. It's like, but they were missing something else. Whatever looks perfect from afar was far from perfect for all of us. Nobody had the perfect life. And whatever kind of diversity it is, and I love, Tamika, that you said your diversity was much more about than just your color. I love what both you and Thomas said about being curious, being a lifetime learner. I mean, if you're curious about people and genuinely interested in other people, I don't care who it is. People like people that are interested in them, and whatever barrier you think that there is, you will overcome it. What Tim said about open yourself up. Yeah, be willing, and even be willing to get hurt sometimes. And have somebody, maybe somebody will be rude or diminish you in some way. Believe me, it's happened to me plenty of times. I've gotten swatted down plenty of times in my life. But that's okay, because you learn from it. So I think the reason how I didn't ask to be on this panel, by the way, I was just talking to Elizabeth and Nicole about what it was going to be about. And I said, well, don't forget to tell them that diversity everybody's diverse and everybody wants to feel included. And it doesn't matter if they're Black or white or, Asian or, everybody, every single person wants to feel valued and included. And whoever you are, any person that you make feel that way is going to value you. And if they're just a jerk, period, then maybe that's not the case. But I like Thomas said, never assume that anybody's a jerk. And then when they prove themselves to be, you don't have to keep coming around to get swatted down again. But I think there's so much wisdom in what Yoso said about our common humanity. There's so much more that connects us. And people that don't open themselves up to experience all different kinds of people and whatever that entails, their food, their, where they grew up, not being curious about other people and wanting to hear about them, it's way more interesting than talking about yourself. So having said that it's more interesting than talking about yourself, I'm going to turn it over and you can have other people ask questions. So thank you all so much, by the way. You're all so wise you're also young and so wise. It's amazing. Thank you
so much, Darla. That was incredible. And it's such a pleasure to have you on as a panelist on the CSF webinar. But all of you did such an amazing job and shared so much wisdom and little pieces of nugget. It's super exciting because I know, if I was, taking notes, mental notes of everything that each one of you said. And for our attendees, if you missed something, you're like, oh my gosh, I wish I could go back and re-listen to what Tamika said because it really resonated with me. You're in luck because we will be posting this webinar on YouTube. So you can go back and watch it and, listen to something Thomas said or Josu or Tim or even Darla. And so with that said, we're going to head into the Q&A section. And we already have our first question. Panelists, remember, if you want to answer the question, just go ahead and raise the hand feature. I'll call on whoever's hand I saw go up first. Either way, you all get to answer one of these questions. So the first question from one of our attendees is, how do you seek out and form friendships with people from other backgrounds when it might feel easier to stay within your own comfort zone? I think we touched on this a little bit, but I think they might want some specifics. So if anybody wants to answer this. So okay, Tamika, go ahead, Tamika. Oh, I think you need to unmute yourself first.
I do. I put my hand down and stayed on mute. I would say I think it really depends on what situation it is, because I think work and school are totally different. And just like, general socializing. But what I would say is finding the social gatherings. Maybe I'm a social butterfly. So it comes from this lens. So like Josie said, the happy hours, the volunteering activities. A lot of organizations do volunteering activities. If you're looking at school, whether it's high school or college, they always have interest. Like if you were interested in cheesesteaks, I went to school in Philly. So we had a cheesesteak group. So if you want to go look at cheesesteaks, you had a group of people that went to go to the different cheesesteak spots in Philly. So whatever school or university you have, or you're in, they have volunteer opportunities, they have social activities, whether I know for me, I volunteered at the animal shelter. I love animals. So I did orientations at the animal shelter. I volunteered with senior citizens, World War II veterans. I love volunteering. Volunteered with children, like anything that was an opportunity that I was interested in, that's what I did. So a lot of times I'll tell somebody that going on Google. So if your school or university doesn't have it, your local church doesn't have it, any organization that you're already involved in, your family's already involved in doesn't have it, Google it. If you're interested in something, your neighborhood and the thing you like. So for me, I work with adults all day, and that can be exhausting. So when I look for opportunities outside, it's something that's social, that's fun. I teach yoga, so it's yoga, it's food stuff, it's again volunteering, whether it's kids or animals. I love gardening. So it's like your neighborhood and then that thing you like. And even if it's that your neighborhood and that thing you think you might like, go for it. You're gonna meet people anyway.
Yeah, well said. Josie, did you want to answer the question too?
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit more onto that. So, I would just say I personally agree with the question. Like it's easier to, stay in your status quo with your own friends. And I look back to when I was in school and I was in that situation where I was trying to meet new people. My advice is, try to find common ground early. Like I remember when I was trying to make new friends in school, I would just see like a group of people maybe wearing like Giants jerseys, and I was like a Giants fan. And then we just talk about football first, and start getting to know people that way. And then the conversations will just organically shift to something else, and you'll get to know other aspects of like someone's personality or that group of people's thoughts. So that's how I tend to approach meeting a new group of people. But it ultimately comes down to if you have to make an effort to leave your status quo, and it's not easy, and that's something I've struggled with too, especially earlier in my academic and professional career. But I always try to remind myself that what really, at least for me, what stems that fear is the fear of not being accepted or rejected, right? And I try to remind myself that the fear of not knowing is always worse than the fear of being rejected or not accepted, right? And I'd rather know that, okay, maybe this group isn't for me, than like looking back the next day and being like, wow, I should have reached out to those people and just getting a no. Yeah.
Thank you so much for adding that. So we're going to go on to the next question. Before I ask it, I do want to say something about what Josu and Tamika mentioned. Is one thing I did in a job that I had is I found out that there was a soccer team that they played every Thursday, and it was a lot of like some of the execs and some of like, and I was like, oh, can I join this? They're like, oh, there's no girls on the team. I'm like, are you saying there can't be? And they're like, no, join us on Thursday. And it just really helped me, as I played soccer in a high school, and they didn't expect me to be good. And I like got a corner kick on the first game and helped our team win. And so, also find things that you're passionate about, or that you're, not necessarily good at, but, if you do have knowledge on that, that's really eases up the tension on like joining, a new group, whether that's in college or at the workplace. So going on to the next question. If you went to a college where you were in the minority, can you talk about what steps you took that made it easier, especially right at the beginning of freshman year? Yeah, That's it's a little bit relevant to the first question, but it's still a different phase of, yeah, those first couple of weeks when you're first starting, like, yeah, how do you break that tension if you can't just, join the soccer game? Anybody want, oh, Thomas, go ahead. I didn't even see your hand up. You want to take?
Yeah, this question goes back to what I was speaking about when I said build community. And so, like, what we call low hanging fruit, like go for the thing that is easiest for you, what you're used to, what you like. I'll give an example. In high school, I was involved in student government. And when I went to Skidmore, although I did feel uncomfortable at the onset of just, being, one of very few Black people, I joined student government. And within student government, there were like no Black people at all. But I know I loved student government and I loved the content. And then I was able to network and liaise around that. And then all of the things that I was interested, I joined. And I was just naturally curious. And then from there, I made friends. And then those friends introduced me to more friends. And then I started learning about different things. But it really depends who you are and what you like. Some people, and it's okay to be yourself. Some people are comfortable with what they like, and some people are just curious about different things. I'm one of those, like, very curious, like, if I would have met Darla and she told me she was from South Dakota, I would have asked so many questions. Even if I was wrong, even if I sounded like stupid, I would still try to just learn and then go from there. So start from the community and then build out for what's more comfortable from you. And second, I would ask professors. Like, in every environment you have like authoritative figures, I would say. Like, you have professors. If you're like Tamika and you go to these events, there's someone who's facilitating, and so just go to them and say, hey, I'm like this, I'm a little nervous, like, do you have anybody that I should meet or that you'd be open to introducing me to? And they're going to introduce you to someone that's like likable, and that's going to make you feel comfortable and kind of make you feel more comfortable and learn, meet more people.
Thank you so much, Thomas. But anybody want to answer that? We have another question on board if there's no one to answer this one. Okay, we'll move on. But thank you so much, Thomas, for adding to that. I totally agree. What kind of career resources are available to students from underrepresented groups? So I think, they might mean things like scholarships or programs or anything like that. So any resources that you think might be available? Anybody want to answer this one? Oh, perfect, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think a lot of colleges do appreciate candidates within diversity and inclusion to take opportunities. So if you go into any of the career centers or any counselors, they will navigate you to numerous opportunities for scholarships or job applications that specifically tailor to diversity candidates. For example, if you were into, let's say, consulting, they have events for just women, and women to just network and get to know each other. And whereas this whole diversity events that are just available for people like ourselves. But having said that, I would definitely advise you to reach out to alums as well, like school alums, people who have been in the shoes of where you want to be. I think networking is so important, especially from college. They'll talk to you for just having graduated from the same place as you did, or even high school, right? If you have that connection, they're more willing to talk to you because you're no longer a stranger. Or even if they're a stranger, they're who knows, they might have 5 minutes to just spend time on you, and you might learn something about something that you just didn't know that's going to be really helpful in your career. So I would say, there are first resources available, and secondly, I highly advise you to take advantage and reach out.
Yeah, definitely. That's very helpful, Tim. Tamika, go ahead. Oh, yeah.
A rookie mistake all over again. I'll say this a million times, Google is your friend. So, when you identify, again, for me, I would say, when I thought I wanted a career in HR, I looked up every resource for Black folks that I could find. So I Googled Black in HR, women in HR, women in Philadelphia, HR in Philadelphia. So anything, HR in New York, that's close enough. So finding ways like those keywords will help you identify what groups are available, because a lot of times people just don't look. And to Tim's point, finding the alumni, finding people that look like you, that are in these spaces, reaching out to them on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a huge resource. Those groups are on LinkedIn too. So then if again, you're looking for Black in HR, you find the HR group for Black folks, then you find the group on LinkedIn, there's like 300 of them. Make those connections, like try to find ways to build those connections. There's so many ways if you just look. And so, there, like Tim said, there are people in your shoes that have done it, and they're almost 99.9% of the time more than happy to help you out with your journey. But you just have to look and you have to ask.
Yes, exactly, 100%. Josu, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll just add one thing. I would really advise to look at these opportunities earlier rather than later, especially for like internships or full-time jobs once you get into college. There's a ton of companies that do these events or internships specifically targeting people with diverse backgrounds, starting as early as the summer after freshman year. And that's just something I was not even aware about when I went to school, and I missed out on some of those events and internship opportunities. But I just want to make everyone aware that those are available even as early as after freshman year, if you look hard enough.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much. And we're going to move on to the next question. But before we do that, I do want to say that just to add on to what Tamika mentioned, she mentioned LinkedIn and connecting with people on there. But there's also a lot of, resources and opportunities available on other platforms as well. So if you look up like hashtag, Latin opportunities, there's a lot of competitions. There's like essay submissions. There's like resources. There's workshops. Where if you join a workshop, not only are you getting the knowledge, but you might meet people in that workshop. And so things like that. So LinkedIn is a great place, a great resource, and it's not used as much. It's used more now, but I don't think it has been used as much by kids in high school. And I think it would be important to start a LinkedIn in high school, especially if you have an idea of where your career might go. And lastly, I would also mention to ask your teachers, ask the administrators around you, because they might know of a program that's going on, but they don't know that you would be interested in it. And so if you ask, your faculty members or teachers, like, hey, I'm interested in knowing if this is available, they might like, oh, I heard about something like that, and they can give you that resource. Also, CSF is on LinkedIn. So if you're not following the CSF page on LinkedIn, you should also do that. It's not up here in my little social media thing, but if you look at CSF New York, we do have a network group on LinkedIn, so you can check that out. So with that being said, I know we only have like 12 minutes left for the webinar, so we're going to go on to the next question. Okay, so it says, Thomas said you should be unapologetically yourself. But is it ever difficult being yourself at work while still being professional? I think it's a really good question. Who wants to tackle this one? All right, Thomas, go ahead.
I got called out, so I guess love the question. Love the question. This is something that I grappled with a lot, right? Because when I'm in the South Bronx visiting my friends, I carry myself a little different than when I'm in the professional environment, than when I'm in the class, when I see my grandmother, how I talk to her, how I act with her, it's totally different. And I recognize that it's okay. It's okay. And all those different like Thomases and different environments, those are all me, right? Like it's the core of who I am, my character, my values. They are consistent amongst. I think when you're, the emotional intelligence, the EQ, and being around different groups, how you act does have to change. That doesn't mean you're not being unapologetically yourself, right? And so when I see my grandmother and I yell and we're speaking Spanish and it's a lot of love, that's not really conducive or normal. I wouldn't even want to do that in a professional environment. And when I see my friends on the corner, for example, like that's not how I would greet them. And so I think, and I hope others jump in on this question because I think it's a great question. But I always used to think that I was contradicting myself, and I always used to like really think a lot, like, why do I act like this and why do I act like that? And I thought it was a bad thing. And I thought, I was selling out and I was being funny, but then I recognized like, no, this is you. This is who you are, and it's okay. And so that's all I'll say. If there's a follow-up, I'm happy to answer it, but be unapologetically yourself, have the same morals, the same values, the same character. And if you're ever in an environment where, or in a situation where you're not sure if you represented yourself, make sure you have a mentor or make sure you have someone that's a sounding board and talk to them about what happened, and they'll let you know. They'll know you very well, and they'll let you know if you didn't represent yourself well in that situation, or if you did what you were supposed to do in that environment.
Yeah, great. I think that's a great answer. Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that was all great points. And to just add on, I think Darla had mentioned something very important earlier when she spoke. She had said that you as a person from diversity have something that maybe others can't bring, or, you can also appreciate what others, you don't have that others have. And for myself, I just somehow developed that confidence within my experiences and myself. And to prove that, I started my first job at Goodwill as a cashier. I'm not saying a cashier is not, it's not a bad job at all, but I'm saying that actually led me to land my job in finance because, I connected the dots saying, I ended up, I was a staple at Goodwill trying to buy a $50 sneakers for $5. And now I'm here for this interview, basically wanting to buy this company and, doing my research to buy cheap at the cheapest cost that I can and help you do that. And I just made that dots, and, from that experience and some people might be embarrassed that they were cashier and they just had to work during their high school because, their parents couldn't support you. But you just got to take that as your advantage, what makes you strong, and, really don't apologize for who you are. And people are going to appreciate that.
Darla, thank you so much, Tim. That was very, very good piece of advice.
Yeah, well, I've been in the workforce, I guess, longer than anybody else on here, probably longer than the combined careers of some of you people on here. But though, I struggled with the same thing when I came out of law school. All women wore blue suits with bow ties and white blouses. And I did this for about 6 months. And then I thought, this is one place I can be myself. I started to dress, I was only the third woman, but I started to dress like, I still dressed professionally, but I didn't wear a uniform. And that was like the first place that I sort of pushed what I thought was a little bit of the envelope. But I think I think we all have to gauge ourselves about forming your conscience. Is my conscience properly formed? I know how to behave properly within certain boundaries. Like there are norms for proper behavior in social settings, and then that's something you tune yourself into, because you don't want to. We don't want to behave like the people at that service I was telling you about. And we may be all fluttering on the inside, but we know there are certain norms of behavior. And that doesn't mean, like Thomas said, that you lose your essential self, because the core of who you are is still your values and your integrity and your compassion. And these things express themselves in slightly different ways. And I think it's sort of sad in the workplace now that I'm a hugger. I think in a lot of places you can't hug anymore because you can't touch another person. So, now there have been all these rules that have been put on top, layered on us. So you're constricted on whether or not you can totally be yourself. But I think the core of who you are within the norms of what's acceptable business behavior, and I'm kind of sad that some of the things that are acceptable business behavior now are even more restrictive than I would have, than when I started out. By the way, I still hug sometimes, so I'm just saying. Anyway, I run a not-for-profit. We only have 13 employees, and I warn people first. And COVID stopped a lot of that stuff too. So, but I think it's really important that, you know, there's different, the core of who you are, it's really going to the core of who you are. And not necessarily, yeah, there's little refinements we all have to do to be okay in a work environment. But I don't think you ever have to change the core of who you are. And I think and there's ways to even push the envelope a little bit, whether it's, I mean, now things like how you dress for work, I think that's not even anything anybody even thinks about much anymore, because people pretty much wear what they want for the most part. But I think it's not as hard as you think. And you know when you're pushing something just to push it versus do I need to really do this to be myself? Because there's a lot of things you can, even in a family environment, there are a lot of ways in life that we have to keep ourselves in check a little bit here and there to get along with people. It's just the way it is. And that's an okay thing. You know, people get married because, well, one of the things marriage does is it rubs off the rough edges. And I think I'm a single person now, and you know, you have to really work at thinking about other people ahead of yourself when you're single. When you're married and have a family, you kind of forced, if you have a baby and a newborn infant, you've got to think about somebody other than yourself. And I think if you always use that as a measure, am I putting the needs of other people above my own, which is counterintuitive to the way a lot of us think. But I think if we are always thinking about how can I do better for others, as opposed to how can I take care of myself, it'll become less of an issue and less of a question.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Darla. So we have one last question, but we're going to do a speed round of this question because we only have 4 minutes left. Okay. So if each of you can just give me one sentence, not a run-on sentence, but one sentence. Wait, hold on. Where did it go? Here it is. Okay. So if you can share one piece of advice with our alumni on what you've learned about diversity and inclusion and what their takeaway should be. So I know it's kind of a two-part, so I'll give you a two-part sentence with a comma. So we'll go in order of which I had you come on initially. So Tamika, you can go first.
Dang, I knew I was gonna be first. Okay, so my 2 parts is diversity is complicated. There's 1,000 different ways you can rip it apart outside of what you look like and what you're interested in. Full stop. Second piece is be patient with yourself. No one here has come to the person they are overnight. You live, you learn, you mess up, you're wrong. Just be patient. It'll make sense eventually.
Yes, now I made the first the error. Okay, so Tim, you're next.
Yeah, to build off of that, I would say that diversity is all about your own experience and other people's experiences. And and to build off on that again, I would say that just be nice. And you know, people are gonna like people who are nice, no matter what skin color or what job or where you're raised, where you come from. If you're nice, people are gonna like you, and that's gonna, you know, take you to a long path of wellness.
Perfect, thank you. And then Thomas?
First part, I would say diversity is love. Yes, end quote. And then the second part I'd say is life is a collection of experiences, and it's more enriched the more different people you have in it.
Yes, I 100% agree. Okay, and then Josu.
Yeah, so diversity for me, that even though it's challenging, it's rewarding. And no matter what, and the second part, no matter what, whether your interests change or stay consistent, never compromise your character and integrity.
Thank you. Darla.
Well, I guess I would just say you were meant to be exactly who you are. Your gender, your race, your family of origin. It's all, and it's a unique combination of things that nobody else has. And it's actually exciting because within that place, you are meant to do, coming from where you come from with everything that makes you you, you're meant to do something no one else ever created before you or ever to come after you can do. And that's finding that thing is the most exciting thing that you can think about.
Yes, wonderfully said, all of you. I feel the pressure to also add on to that. I'm not a panelist though, I'm a host. Okay, I would say diversity is life. You know, like something to pick off what Thomas said, is just the diversity of your friends and of the people that you surround yourself with. It just brings you so many different perspectives in life, and it can just really make life more beautiful than it already is. And so just embrace it in everywhere you go. Embrace your own diversity and the diversity in other people, and just try to give every single person a chance, and think the best first before you assume anything. But that's a wrap. Oh my goodness, that went by so fast. So I will say again, if you are not following CSF on social media, I am the social media manager, so I'm obligated to say, please follow us. Again, I'm going to reiterate, LinkedIn, we're not new to, we have been on LinkedIn for a while, but we are starting to announce it more. So if you don't have us on LinkedIn, there is something you can do as an alumni. When you have a LinkedIn, you have like your resume, you can put under volunteer experiences, our CSF Young Leaders and our CSF President Council members, you can put CSF under that volunteer tab. And also our alumni, you can go, if you're in our alumni network and you've volunteered for events as well to help the scholars, you can also put CSF under that volunteer tab, and that looks great. And then it connects you to other alumni and other YLs and expands your network even further. So I highly suggest doing that. This link will be available to watch this webinar. It will be available up on our social media accounts, maybe in the next week or in the next couple days. I'm not sure yet, but just look out for it. If you follow our social media, you won't miss it. And so also to our YLs and our President Council, if you want to share this with anybody that once the YouTube link is up and you're like, what, I'd like to send this to, so-and-so, so maybe the students can watch it and take something from it, please, you're welcome to do that. And now we're a minute over, so I'm going to go ahead and take a screenshot of everyone who's been here today. So on the count of 3. Okay, hold on. Let's see. There we go. 1, 2, 3. Okay, perfect. Have a lovely night. Thank you so much to all of our panelists who joined us. They gave us such wisdom to work with. I hope you took notes if you didn't watch the YouTube, and I can't wait to have you all back here on again. Thank you for the alumni who joined, and especially thank you to Darla for joining us tonight, the president of the Children's Scholarship Fund, who just wholeheartedly loves CSF and everything that we do, and she just, from her core, just this is really close to her heart, and it means a lot that she's here tonight. So thank you all. Have a lovely night, and we'll see you next time.
You guys are all amazing, by the way. I wish I was as wise as you when I was your age.
Thank you, Darla. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.